All right, great. So today we're here to talk about how we streamline lead to cash end-to-end at Slack. So hey everyone, I'm Monica. I have been working at Slack for almost 4 years now, and I love my job as an architect and product manager of Slack on Slack in the BizTech engineering team. Prior to Slack, I worked at VMware, Facebook, and MySpace, mainly focused on activity streams, platforms as a service, and collaboration. Today, I have invited two of my favorite cross-functional partners to talk about what we have built at Slack together.
Hi, everyone. I'm Justin Oyoung from Slack, and my team within sales strategy and operations focus primarily on process tools and planning for our sales and customer success teams. One of the core aspects of our remit is partnering closely with Monica Wilkinson and others across our BizTech team to deliver best-in-class go-to-market systems for our sales organization.
Hey everyone, I'm Kiona Davies, and I've been with Slack now for 2 years, and I'm part of our sales operations team leading our deal strategy and operations function. So my team works closely with sales and is focused on structuring and improving complex, non-standard deals. And we also partner closely with our BizTech team to continuously streamline and improve our sales processes. So great to be here today. Thank you guys so much for having us. All right, so before we dive in, we wanted to take a moment to quickly highlight what is Slack, because everything that you're about to see was built on top of our platform using Workato as that integration layer to connect the systems that Slack and many of you all use in your quote-to-cash process. So we like to think that Slack helps make all of your software work better together, and Slack is a place where teams connect with the people and the apps that they use every day to get work done. So with that, Monica, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks. And as I mentioned before, I work in business technology, which many companies call IT. So our VP, Steven Franchetti, has done a great job really up-leveling our offering. Our mission is to create exceptional technology experiences with Slack at the core. And we focus on delivering simplicity, impact, and insight. To that effect, one of the key things we wanted to do was offer a program to foster innovation. Slack on Slack is our internal initiative to build apps and workflows via the Slack API platform, which help our company achieve key business results. We have for this called Slack on Slack.
And Kiona and I are both part of Slack's finance business operations team. As part of what we call FinBizOps, we see ourselves as a team of trusted partners for strategic, financial, and go-to-market decision-making, working to deliver sustainable revenue, customer value, and growth. We truly pride ourselves on connecting the dots across the various areas of our business and really being at the center of everything business-related. So with that, here today, we'll share a few of the unique ways in which, in close partnership with Monica and her BizTech team, we've really streamlined our end-to-end lead-to-cash process. We'll start with the top of the funnel, talking about pipeline generation, then we'll move to deal approvals, and finally end with order automation. Then we'll open up to any questions you may all have. So starting at the 10,000-foot view, here's a quick overview of the lead-to-cash process at Slack. We'll start with lead and pipeline generation, move to opportunity management, and subsequently CPQ. And finally, we'll end with contract management, followed by invoicing and billing management. Across the board, we've introduced some innovative and exciting technology for solutions, and we'll cover 4 of them specifically today. Today, our sales team benefits from many of the best-in-class improvements we've introduced that focus on what Monica alluded to earlier: simplicity, impact, and insight. They can generate powerful customer-ready decks at their fingertips. They can leverage a bespoke prospecting-focused newsfeed for all of their accounts, and they can submit and finalize a deal proposal all without leaving Slack. These Slack for solutions really reduce context switching and promote collaboration across our entire sales organization. So the first area we'll touch on is pipeline generation at Slack. This all started with our Midas Touch bot. The problem we were focused on here was that, account executives, customer success managers, and renewal managers were spending hours extracting data from a variety of sources and reports to truly understand a given customer's growth and maturity. It was difficult for them to identify the most relevant narratives and really translate that data into actionable insights, compelling visualizations, and more importantly, into a polished, cohesive presentation. The solution that we came up with was truly crowdsourced from across the company. It was even highlighted at an internal Slack Tank event, which is our own version of the famous Shark Tank show. And really seeing the excitement around the Slack first solution helped spearhead and drive the momentum around this umbrella of technology solutions and initiatives. And with that, I'll hand it over to Monica to show you what we built.
Thanks, Justin. So Midas TouchBot has been a huge success, and I thought I would save some time, if you guys don't mind, playing a nice video my teammates made with the marketing team about how it works.
Sometimes the numbers speak for themselves. That's why bringing data to customer conversations is so important for sales teams, like Jack and Sarah from the sales team at Slack. While preparing for a contract renewal, they use data to demonstrate how Slack changes the way people work. They sift through countless spreadsheets and dashboards to find meaningful numbers. Then they have to craft a compelling data-informed story from scratch. Doing all of this, it takes a full day, or at least it used to. At Slack, we build our own custom integrations for our internal teams, like Midas Touch, which delivers data-informed presentations to our sales teams in seconds. Here's how we use it. In Slack, folks on our sales team can type /Midas, click Let's Get Started, and then search for an account. Midas Touch pulls data from multiple systems and compiles a customized data story into a Google Slides presentation, all with one command. The data is presented right alongside easy-to-understand narratives. Our teams get templated talk tracks that provide additional context on how to interpret and frame the data. And these slides are completely customizable. They can edit the content for each of our customers' unique context, or further explore the data to sharpen the story. Midas Touch helps our sales teams work smarter, so they have more time to focus on the important thing, helping our customers get the most out of Slack.
Awesome. So we launched Midas Touch back in October 2019. And since then, we've had tremendous adoption. So we have more than 400 sales members using Midas Touch for over 7,300 times since our October launch. And we measured this, I think, a month ago. There's been huge time savings. This project is really impactful. So more than 5,000 hours are saved every month thanks to Midas Touch. It's been rapidly adopted because it brings data to where people are, and we're projecting that this tool is actually going to save around 30,000 hours in fiscal year 2021. It's also influenced revenue. So we've seen that around 70% of our total ACV for the quarter in Q4 came from deals where they use Midas Touch. So how did we build this? Let's take a look. We started small, prototyping the first version on Workato. So we added a custom Looker SDK, as well as a custom SDK for Google Slides. And we were only executing a couple of queries at that time. So we were able to show the proof of concept and get a really great reception. Once we started scaling that sales stack, we were executing a lot of queries. So it was not going to scale. We decided to consolidate all the queries into a dashboard and execute asynchronously. So once the job was completed in Looker, it would reach out to Workato via webhook. Workato became the orchestrator, and then it would turn around, take that data, and send it to a dedicated microservice, which could use background workers to unzip the data and interpolate it into the Google Slides using Google's Python SDK. And if you want to read more about how we did this and the exact methods that we use, we have another blog post that we released a bit ago that you can check out, also on our Slack developer blog. So with that, I'll turn back to Justin to talk about pipeline generation.
Well, thanks, Monica. So now I'll touch on the other solution we focus on within pipeline generation. I'll start by sharing some context around the problem we are facing around lead and pipeline generation specifically. As you all may know, lead generation is key for continued top line growth for all businesses. And what's unique to Slack is that we have a go-to-market model that includes self-serve free and trial teams. So it's critical to provide our sales team actionable and insightful information so that we can scale effectively. We really wanted to reduce the burden of prospecting across an entire sales territory and maximize field capacity for selling. So more specifically, the problem we were facing here was that we found across our sales team that different users really lacked the data they needed to prioritize their prospecting efforts. Some developed ad hoc solutions by leveraging piecemeal internally available information scattered across a variety of systems and pages. These lackluster solutions really missed out on key signals, and moreover were used inconsistently across teams and segments. And more importantly, they also existed outside of Slack channels and conversations. So our solution here was partnering with Monica and our internal BizTech teams. We built a bespoke prospecting-focused newsfeed that delivers key activities and metrics about existing customers and prospects to Slack channels. This information is visible to anyone on a given account team and allows for easy in-channel collaboration. We enabled reps to take recommended actions in Slack on new customer momentum across their book of business at the click of a button. And with that, I'll hand it over to Monica to show you what we built.
Thanks, Justin. So let's cover the functionality that we include in this V1 of what we call Midas Touch for prospecting. So we have the key activity notifications in Slack, which encourage the sales team to take the best action. We have the weekly account digest showing key metrics and highlighting any significant change, as well as we have really flexible configuration, which supports subscribing to individual accounts as well as to your entire territory or someone else's territory. And all of this is backed by really robust engagement tracking. Let's take a look. So we had an existing slash command that you just saw in our video, /Midas. We were able to enhance that to showcase the additional functionality. In this case, being able to subscribe to prospecting notifications. So when you hit that configure button, you're going to see a modal in Slack that is going to allow you to select whether it's a DM that you want to share the notifications to or a channel. And so in this case, I'm highlighting that I'm subscribing to an individual account. It's probably called Acme. And so I'm subscribing to that. I can also subscribe, as I mentioned before, to my entire territory. So I would probably pick a channel like Monica's territory. And so we really, really invested in this piece of functionality because we have AEs that work in different segments. So we have SMB, we have mid-market, we have enterprise, we have large enterprise, and there's just different levels of granularity that they each need. And so in this case, you can see on the screen that probably in length or end, they would be subscribing to individual accounts. And then if we go now to mid-market and SMB, they are probably subscribing to their entire territory. And maybe their manager is also helping them by subscribing to their individual territories. And this also helps us, in addition to managers, there's other supporting roles like BDRs. And so BDRs can also subscribe to all of their A's accounts with this view. So we thought that was pretty powerful. So what do these alerts look like? So here are the workspace activity alerts. So a Slack team is called a workspace, and an account may have multiple teams or workspaces. And what you see here is that for many of our customers, they will start using Slack for free, or at least have some free usage. And so in this case, it's relevant whenever they hit certain integration limits. So in this case, we're seeing limits around, I forget the number of integrations it is, but limits around messaging and so on. And this is what provides the context that allows AEs to reach out. So you see here that we have 2 calls to action, view in Mission Control and view in Salesforce. So Mission Control is our internal name for Slack's admin tool. So here we have a snippet of information, but if they really want to dig into the details, they can go into Mission Control from here. And the link for Salesforce is at the account level. So in there, they can see all of the account activity and all of the necessary context, any deals that may be going on and so on. And then the other kind of activity alerts that we have are called contact activity alerts. And so this highlights the actions that key decision makers are taking. And so we decided to start with 4 contact activity alerts. So we want to know when somebody has attended a field marketing event. So for example, it's really relevant to us if people are attending an event that like this one, or like, for example, around Workday or around Salesforce or around remote work, right? And in addition to that, we have pricing page visits, installing what we consider a productivity app, and inviting a large number of users. But we only bring these alerts into Slack if we think these are key decision makers. And the way we've been able to gauge that is that we have enriched the data through OpenPrice. So this is data that is publicly available. So it's nothing that was in the product, in case you're concerned, that we've been able to purchase these data sets, enrich, and not only bring that enrichment into Salesforce, we have also been able to host enriched data in Snowflake, which is our data warehouse. So the calls to action in here that you see are view on LinkedIn, view in Salesforce, and add to SalesLoft. And SalesLoft in particular is very interesting. I'm new to SalesLoft. I just started using the software because of this project, but it's a fantastic tool. So it allows AEs to take recommended actions given the activity alert or given a signal, right? And so the actions may be send an email, make a phone call, and they are pre-built templates that are very easy to manage. And so what we're doing in partnership with Sales Ops and the BDR team is that we are aligning on the naming convention for all these cadences, right? Such that when there is a particular type of activity, we can then recommend the right cadence. And we can find it programmatically and add the users to that cadence to start nurturing and prospecting. And then back to, providing important context, we have the weekly metrics post. So in here, you can't tell which company it is, but here's some engagement and what has changed in the last 6 months, right? So it's basically given the pulse of the account. What are the important metrics that the rep should keep in mind when reaching out? And you heard me mention that there's going to be different ways in which the AEs are going to subscribe. So when they are subscribing to multiple accounts in a territory, we're going to be able to aggregate all of these activities across, in this case, we're showing weekly and maybe a different time period. And then with Slack, the nice thing that you can do is you can use BlockKit to pop out modals so that they can drill in and find more information. So for example, in this case, we're aggregating the fact that 3 contacts attend the events and logged in for the first time and so on. And you can view and take action directly from the modal. In addition to that, we are launching the ability to find the trending accounts right from the app home. So if for those of you not as familiar with building Slack applications, Slack now has, for all of its apps, an app home that you can turn on. And it's an additional surface that users can come to find helpful information and interact with the bots. And so in this case, what we're doing is highlighting based on activity, which are the accounts that you should be paying attention. And then providing, if I'm not showing it in the screenshots here, But if you click on this overflow menu, you can then proceed and engage with the calls to action as well as share into channel. So let's go to how this was built. And so you've seen a little bit ago that I showed the Midas Touch classic architecture. So this is built on that foundation. We definitely are moving an incredible amount of data. So we partner with the sales analytics team to take all of the signals and build an aggregated view in Looker. And in order to consume that data, we are definitely still using Workato as that orchestrator. And it reminds us to go every day to go and pull this data. And so we can then ingest the data and based on the subscriptions that we're tracking, deliver it to each channel. And so one thing that you'll see here that I have not highlighted yet is that we're using our health monitoring system to ensure that we have delivered all of the notifications we need to deliver. So measuring is really important. This same health monitoring system is what helped us provide that impact analysis for Midas Touch Classic. And so with that, I'll hand over to Kiona to talk about deal approvals.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Monica. Next slide. All right. So if you guys work with sales, you're bound to hear the saying that time kills all deals. So as you guys would guess, at Slack, we use Slack channels for deal collaboration. And so these deal channels are that centralized forum for cross-functional collaboration on deal structuring, discussion, negotiations, and ultimately any non-standard deal approvals that are needed. However, the problem was that summarizing the deal structure in Slack was manual and it didn't always include all the relevant information that was needed. And there was this lack of transparency over who needed to be invited to the channel, who needed to approve, and whether or not we had all the requisite approvals. And so that internal back and forth took critical time from our sales team that could have been avoided. And so as a public company, it's absolutely critical that we get all approvals for any sort of non-standard commercial terms before they're socialized with the customer. And we needed to move fast with the pace of our sales team's growth. So our solution was really to scale the way that we're doing deal approvals and take out that administrative overhead for our sales team. So first off, with the introduction of Approvals Bot, it will automatically send the deal proposal to the deal channel. And so all of this data is directly driven from the Salesforce, where sales is already maintaining their opportunity and quote information. And so the best part of this is that it's templatized to pull relevant and complete details on that proposed deal structure. Secondly, no more guessing who needs to approve in channel, because Approval Bot will invite the relevant approvers to the channel and it will mention them one by one in the order that they need to approve, and it will update their status in the channel. Next build. All right, and then lastly, all approvals in Slack are captured back in Salesforce. As well, we've introduced additional flexibility by allowing AEs to either release the draft watermark or they can recall the quote directly from Slack if they have changes. So let's take a quick peek at what it looks like. All right, so once the sales rep has their proposed deal structure and they're ready for that review in Slack, they simply just need to press Submit for Slack approval directly in Salesforce. And what this will do is it will automatically create the Slack channel if it doesn't already exist, and it will send the proposed deal structure that you're seeing in front of you to the Slack channel. Next build, please. So Approvals Bot will automatically invite all the approvers based on the quotes configuration and @mention them. So really it's doing this by reading that configuration in Salesforce and replicating it into the Slack channel, and of course @mentioning in the sequencing that is required. So approvers can either approve or they can reject directly in that Slack thread. And we always like to emphasize that this is a normal Slack thread. So we really encourage stakeholders to ask questions and have a conversation as part of that approval cycle if needed. Last build, please. And so really, as an approver, it's incredibly critical to be able to move fast and have the complete relevant information to make that informed decision without context switching or leaving Slack, which is what we've achieved with this solution. Next slide, please. All right, so ApprovalsBot has actually been in development in multiple phases for over the past 2 years. And so we've seen really healthy adoption in terms of end users approving directly from Slack, whether it's on their desktop, whether it's on their phone. But the goal is also to still have that flexibility. So nothing changes about the native Salesforce ability to approve directly from CPQ. But in that time, we've seen a significant decrease in the end-to-end approval turnaround time. So what used to take days, multiple days to get a full cycle of approvals is now taking less than 1 day. And so ultimately, the sales team is able to move faster through the sales cycle and focus on selling and just let automation do all the administration for them. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Monica.
All right, I just unmuted myself. Getting some good questions. Thanks everybody for posting your questions. So let me go to the next slide. Okay, so how do we build this? So this is a fairly simple event-driven architecture. As you can see on the Salesforce side, we are sending all of the notifications to Workato related to the code approvals. This is custom Apex code, which syndicates all of the information via webhook. Workato acts as the middleware, consuming the events and broadcasting more refined actions to Slack via our approvals bot. An approvals bot is just a facade for Workbot. Workbot is Workato's Slack connector, which is interactive and can be used in a conversational style as well as action-driven. And as you heard, approval actions can happen either in Slack or in Salesforce. And they are handled in the same exact fashion, executing the logic configured in Salesforce approval engine. So I wanted to share a little bit of how we work in Workato. So here you can see one of our many Workato instances for the GTM, which is go-to-market team. And as you can see, it's organized by teams and then by projects. For approvals bot, we use webhooks from Salesforce when the approval state change in order to drive the workflow, and then we publish the pub subtopics. So this is standard Workato functionality where you can subscribe, you can publish or subscribe topics. And so this allowed us to have multiple subscribers and perform different downstream actions in parallel. So in this case, we have 2 different subscribers, and I'll show you what happens next. So one of the subscribers posts to the main DSR channel, and that's what Fiona showed, where all of the approvals are happening as users are clicking the buttons. And I got a good question from the audience around whether clicking the approve or reject happens on behalf of the user. And so the answer is yes. This is one of my favorite features from Workato, is that it has just-in-time authentication. So we are able to basically, the very first time they click approve or reject, Workato will prompt the user to connect to Salesforce. Once that connection is done, we can then take that mapping, and we're actually, they've done, for the more technical folks, they've done the auth dance. So we have the bearer token on the back end for that user, and by we, I really mean Workato. And so we're able to invoke all of the API endpoints on behalf of the user. So when Fiona or a sales manager hits approve, it's really their name and their identity showing up in Salesforce, right? And when that happens in Salesforce, the same action gets reflected in Slack. And so
Yeah,
what
maybe even to add on to that question from Gordon as an end user and as approver myself. So sales ops has the ability to approve on behalf of anyone. So whether they're sales, whether it's legal, rev rec, and executive. And so anytime that we need to bypass an approval, we have the ability to approve on behalf of that person in Slack. It will still say that Kiona approved on behalf of so-and-so. And then another great feature that I wanted to highlight is the fact that Salesforce has a out of office delegated approval framework, and end users can delegate their assigned approver, and the Slack integration will then tag their delegate, and their delegate will have the ability to approve on their behalf because of the setup in Salesforce.
That's a great call out. Yeah, and so this keeps our team productive, right? They don't have to like find their manager or find the proper legal representative. It's all configured in Salesforce and it works seamlessly in Slack. And so just to wrap up this slide, here I'm showing just how easy it is to handle the different actions being performed in Slack. So what you're seeing are recipes, handling workbot commands. And so whether it's a command that the user typed or they clicked a button, it's handled in the same way. And you can see how handling the different actions. And if you want to read more about this, it's in the blog post that I put in the chat. And with that, I'm going to change topics to order automation. So this is the last project that we thought was worth mentioning for this audience. And so this is something that we worked with the team a little bit ago. So it was before we IPO'd. So this was in 2018. Order booking, invoicing, review, and approval was completely manual for all of the sales orders. So not like the credit card or self-serve invoice, self-serve business, but the ones where the sales reps are working with our prospects and customers. And so as part of the IPO readiness requirements, we realized we needed to change ERPs, and the business chose Workday Financials. And so I was part of the integration team along with quite a few others in RevOps and in BizTech. And so we started investigating how Workday Financials, what it required, what it was going to take to this integration, right? And so our task was to automate provisioning and invoicing across all of the sales orders. So this was an integration that bridged Salesforce, Workday, and Slack's admin mission control. And so let me show you where we're at. So this is the system today. And a good portion of the integrations you see here were built by our small BizTech engineering team as part of this order automation project. And so we leverage Workato as the integration layer. And this diagram is a little bit zoomed out, but many of the arrows that you see here are actually Workato recipes. And so let me describe a little bit about how it works. And so we start here in Salesforce. And we just talked about all of the quotes, right? And so once, the customer agrees that they are going to, they sign the order form and the opportunity is marked as close won. Then we send a real-time notification to Workato, which does a couple things. First, it finds the appropriate customer in Workday if they exist. And if not, it creates it. And in addition to that, it takes the primary code and all of its code lines and creates a contract. And so all of the details in the code, as well as the customer's current account and subscription information, are consolidated to generate this contract object in Workday. And so this was quite a complex task. There is a lot of data that had been entered manually for a long time in Salesforce that we needed to line up to Workday. And so once the contract is approved in Workday, then once again, we have that event-driven architecture where we invoke another webhook in Workato. And this helps us, what we do with our webhook is we provision the customer. So say, for example, if they were on Plus and decided to move to Grid, this is when they would be able to see the Grid functionality, or if they purchase EKM or one of our other products. And then once that contract is approved and they are provisioned, we also have to manage the invoicing process. And so once again, Workday creates a billing schedule and sends the invoices, and they need to get approved. And once they are approved, we need to syndicate and synchronize this with Mission Control, because we want our customers to be able to see the PDFs for their invoices. And so this was a complex integration. I haven't even touched on a few of the other things like that layer and short tags. And I don't want to, we can talk offline maybe if you guys have questions, but it was fairly complex. It took a while. And I want to highlight out of this, what I want to highlight is that our goal out of all of this was to automate as much as possible to save time from the revenue operations and the sales operations team. And so we had a few challenges. One of the main challenges that we had, which may sound funny, but it's true, it was addresses. And so in Salesforce, we already had thousands of accounts with manually entered free-form text addresses. And this didn't cleanly fit into Workday's more structured address model, where each country uses different underlying fields and an exact name is needed for components like cities and regions. And so we investigated multiple solutions, and we ended up building an integration with Google's geocoding API, where we were able to take this free-form text and get a parsed address that we could then use in Workday. And so this worked really well in a lot of instances, but in certain regions, this was a challenge still because the names were localized and they were just spelled differently. And so they didn't match exactly. There were other cases where people had put the wrong zip code and Google couldn't actually locate the exact address. So what we did was we decided to, once again, you put WorkBot to work as financial bot, posting into Slack and asking for manual intervention and allowing the team to mark as completed and resume this big backend integration once they had selected the proper address, right? So as soon as we hit that roadblock, we highlight in channel, the revenue operations team in this case would do the necessary step in Workday and then come here to Slack and click Mark Completed. And then what happens is that this is invoking, rerunning that job that had failed in Workato, and it actually resumes the entire backend integration. And so Financials Bot ended up getting extended for other use cases, which helped us reach a goal that we had of 90% automation for the last fiscal year. And it's helped us roll out new offerings, as I was mentioning, like EKM, data residency, and soon Rimeto. And so with that, I'll move to our conclusion. And our main conclusion is that you can see that Slack and Workato are at the core of most applications that have driven impact at Slack in the lead to cash process. And so you can see that Workato is the integration layer and Slack is really our collaboration and user interface layer. And Justin?
Cool. Yeah, and some other lessons learned just from like a business perspective and a cross-functional perspective. One, doubling down on strong cross-functional collaboration was super key, making sure we heard and learned from our end users, accounted for their feedback throughout thoughtful prioritization and design. Secondly, just keeping it simple, leveraging existing tools or processes whenever appropriate. And third, just really leaning into our passion for solving problems for internal customers and delivering impact.
And so you can see Workato and Slack are complementary solutions. You saw that we iterated a lot. We talked about first versions and second versions. And so we feel very much like with Workato and Slack, we can really move fast. And this custom Slack bots that you saw today gave us the ability to have fun and delight our users, as well as provide tightly scoped access, right? So all of this that you saw are custom Slack applications, and we're able to select specifically which scopes they need, as well as personalize them. And they provide the users an intuitive functionality. So this is mainly through the use of Blockit, right? And so with Blockit, it's very standard syntax and functionality, and you can use it across many surfaces at Slack, most every surface. And you don't need to hire a mobile developer, you don't need to hire a front-end developer. You can do it all just using whatever SDK, using curl, using Workato, whatever you want. And finally, the last recommendation that I want to close with is to. And so you saw our use of Healthmon, our use of Looker. And so don't just launch a bot and, get feedback anecdotally. Measure every interaction, measure whether people are engaging and whether they are dismissing and marking things as noisy. And based on that information, iterate. So thanks, everybody. And now we'll be taking some of the additional questions that you all have been posting. Fiona, have you been able to find any questions that you want to bring up?
Yeah, so I've been parsing through the questions, and I think one of the top of mind areas for most folks on this is for Monica. And so how many recipes are in this process, or in these separate processes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so let's see. For order automation, it's probably around 100 recipes, which sounds a little bit daunting. However, we really like to break things into reusable components. And so many times it's just like, it's probably around 12 or so core flows. But for every flow, we break it into, like, for example, we have one recipe that finds or creates a customer, a different recipe that creates a contract, right? And so we break it apart so we can easily identify if there were any issues, exactly where they happen, and be able to rerun just that piece of the workflow, right? And so we're able to build idempotent recipes, and then we're able to rerun those. And then for the other ones, for approval spot, I think it's far less. It's probably around 20 recipes, just handling, once again, like every single click. But I would say don't let that scare you, because you can write a recipe in a matter of minutes. Like, it's just really, if you can think of the steps in English, you can write a recipe. So.
All right, and Monica, not to put you on the spot again, but because we just talked about the order automation, we have a question from David. How long did this end-to-end solution take to build?
Yeah, so we started with order automation in 2018. So I think this has been, it's 3 different projects, and I think we have been working on this in the last couple of years. In parallel, of course, our team is not dedicated to sales. We work with many other parts of the business. So in parallel, we have launched things like approvals bot for expenses. We have launched recruiter bot, metrics bot. So there's a lot of other things that the team is doing. I think what's interesting to me is that all of the projects do require strong partnership with the business. And so it's great to have Justin and Kiona here today because, it's hand in hand. We're with them every day, iterating, showing them multiple revisions, and then starting the UAT, starting to show it to the field. And together we gauge their feedback and engagement as well as look at the metrics.
Yeah, and maybe on that note, there's a good segue question from Jacob. And it was specifically in relation to the approvals bot, but it relates to all of these different processes. So let's talk more about what work we did with sales and the operations team to define the user experience. And so I think, for approvals bot and for all of these initiatives, it really was a balance between flexibility and scale. So we need to either build for one or the other, and we're really gearing towards scale. And so to Monica's point, it really was a partnership throughout the whole journey from an ops and a systems lens. And throughout that journey, we had milestones where we were demoing and getting sign-off from our executive leaders on either the ops team, the biz tech team, and our sales team, just to ensure that the solution we were building for was something that they could advocate for within their teams. And so I think over the course of these projects, there really were frequent touch points and demoing directly to the end customer, which a lot of times is a sales rep or a sales manager, just to ensure we got their live feedback during the process. Anything Monica or Justin you guys would add to that?
Specifically, I would just echo your sentiments. Like that cross-functional collaboration is super key to make sure what you're delivering is going to land well.
Yeah.
Another question that came up earlier and just bubbled up again was, how many people do we have on our teams building and supporting this? And so Monica, maybe, and Justin, I'll let you guys start at the top with the pipe gen initiative.
Monica, do you want to take that in terms of the team size?
Yeah, so let me see if I have an additional. So this is our Slack team today. So I had this ready as an appendix. So you can see it's a really small team. This is the team building Midas Touch. You can see, actually, I put on there all of the bots that each team member has been involved with. In addition to that, we have a specific order automation team, and there's Fred and Justin are part of that team. So they are very much a sister team. And I don't know, Justin, if you want to cover how many people are on your team, but we also do partner with sales analytics. So Scott in particular in sales analytics is such a rock star on the Midas aspect.
Yeah, that kind of handles the technical team, strong cross-functional collaboration with our analytics team. Probably from the sales business operations side, we had 3 people just kind of representing various areas of the business, whether it's a specific region or a specific type of role, like someone who supports BDRs versus someone who supports our account executives, all kind of collecting and sharing that feedback back so we can know that this is going to be effective for them.
Yep, and then moving over to the approvals bot. So on the Salesforce side, we really had one core Salesforce developer who was focused on collaborating with Monica and Basu, who you saw on the previous slide, for developing this. And then, of course, on the ops side, myself and some other members of my team.
That's right. And I just want to highlight for the audience kind of what that team worked on in H1. And so H1 starts in February for us. That's our fiscal year. And so here's a rough example of how much we've been able to accomplish. There's bots in other areas, and I think every single one of the bots here is a work bot facade. Let me go back to the question slide. Anything else, Kiana?
So there is a question, and Monica, I believe this is for you, but what software did you mention you use to log and track the engagement of your workflows and automations?
So we wrote a small microservice. So in addition to Workato, Heroku Enterprise is part of our infrastructure. And we're polyglots, so we write in different programming languages. A lot of the Slack on Slack microservices are written in Python and Django, which is what you saw in the architecture slides. The health monitoring system I wrote 1 or 2 years ago, and it's written in Ruby. And so people that know me know that I love Ruby. But it's just really simple. And once again, it's using that activity streams format that I'm passionate about, and just tracking every single action and how it correlates to the bigger overall transaction. And so it doesn't matter if we're using Workato or Heroku or whatever else, we have a layer on top that allows us to measure and track our SLA across all the systems. And we decided to not build a specific UX for it. We just use Looker, and we've built a dashboard in Looker. And so, for example, for order automation, every day we post into channel how we've done for the previous 24 hours, right? And how many orders, how fast did we turn around? Okay, let's see.
I see a question from Jacob on the intake process for Slack on Slack bots across the company. I can talk a little bit about that and then hand it over to you, Monica. So at Slack, we have a semi-annual charting process where we kind of surface various tasks across the business that require kind of like this tech resources to execute. And through that, we prioritize and kind of commit to various ones. Slack on Slack has been super successful, so we've basically committed time for them, each of the halves, for them to crowdsource ideas through various channels, et cetera. And I'll let Monica touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think, I talked about our Slack on Slack channel, and people submit ideas there quite a bit. And so what we do is we have the internal Slack on Slack team be on call to handle the requests in that channel. And so the first thing that we do is we make sure that it's an idea that our customers could build through the API. And so what I mean by that is we're actually not trying to change Slack, the core product, right? We are not, building a menu within Slack. So we're really just working very much like an external customer. And so first we make sure that we can do whatever work is requested. And then at the same time, we gauge the impact. We ask what they think the impact is, but we also gauge the impact based on how applicable is the solution to the employee base. And so if it's just for 1 or 2 people, we're probably not going to prioritize it. And so generally we're prioritizing initiatives that span a whole department or a whole group of people like managers. So Approvals Bot, for example, is very much built with managers in mind. So in this talk, we saw it working for deals. And we have a version that works for PTO and a version that works for expenses. And we find that's really useful because their managers can find everything that they need to approve in a single location. And so the ideas that don't work out, we raccoon them. That's a term in Slack. That means politely direct them to another channel that can help them. And the ideas that we do take in, we put in Jira as spikes so that we can research them. And then in parallel, we review the charters, right? So we're getting a lot of requests. And so that was the case of Midas Touch for prospecting, for example. Justin's boss, Eli, had submitted a charter around prospecting alerts related to a new metric that we have called GPS. And so at the same time, we got, I think, 2 or 3 requests for saying, hey, the information in Midas Touch slides is great, but it would be so awesome if we could actually get notifications in Slack when the different activities are happening. And so that's why we really said, we really want to do this charter. We're hearing the same needs from our employee base via Slack on Slack. And so here we are ready to launch, close to ready to launch prospecting in a few weeks.
Yeah, and Monica,
I was just going to add that like Monica's team did a really good job. Like one, you have this channel where people post ideas specifically for the Slack on Slack umbrella of work streams. And then 2, you have these charters, and sometimes these charters are like specifically calling out, like, can we design a Slack first bot solution? Other times they're not in that kind of like shape, and Monica does a really good job of identifying them, and like this fits really well in the umbrella that we're trying to spearhead here.
Yeah, and to really kind of almost like piggyback on Monica, you touched upon it, there's other iterations of what an approvals bot is. And so leveraging some of that same framework. And so we had a question from Frank earlier on if approvals bot can work with Asana. And I think like you've touched upon it is approvals bot can work with any sort of third-party software where there's more or less an approve or reject type of function. And so maybe the question, Monica, for you would be how much of that underlying configuration or architecture are you guys able to leverage for approvals bot over approvals bot? Because we know deals approvals bot is only one within kind of the whole suite of the approvals bots that exist.
Yeah, and so I think more and more each time we build a new approval. So specifically on our team, as we are iterating so much, what we try to do is build reusable components, whether it's via microservice or whether it's a set of Workato recipes. And so I think the flow and the design pattern is really well understood. And so that's really the biggest challenge. We don't actually replicate any of the logic inside of Workato, right? So we let Salesforce or Workday, or in this case, Concur for expenses, actually decide, hey, this should go to approval to this person, but wait, they are out. So therefore, the delegate approval is this person. And, we're basically like a very thin layer that just brings this collaboration into Slack. So if there's multiple approvers, right? In the case of PTO, for example, that's independent. We don't really care. We are not deciding, and we're just letting the third-party system tell us if the approval is complete or it needs to be sent to someone else.
I realize we're at time, so with that,
thank you so much.
Yeah,
thanks everyone
for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Kiana and Justin. I really appreciate the partnership, and thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy day. And please check out our blog post, and feel free to reach me on Twitter if you have any specific questions I can help with.
Thank you.
All right, see you guys.